One thing we haven't really addressed yet is the white elephant in the room here, the lack of a tongue in this shoe. So now would be a good opportunity to build that tongue, but it will also be a good opportunity to explore some mesh operations. So we can build this tongue pretty simply using mesh ops. And if you've never used any of Modo's procedural tools, they're pretty cool. They've got a pretty broad range of tool sets in there that lets you model things procedurally. So if you've never used mesh operations before, don't know what they are, it's simply a means of embedding the tools that you use to build the model into the model itself. So in other words, if I took an extrude, when you do an extrude or when you do, say, a bevel operation, once you're done with that bevel operation, you're done. You move on when it comes to direct modeling. But with MeshOp, that bevel operation stays live throughout the whole building process. So you can go back later after you've done a lot of other things to the model and change that particular bevel. So it's a very cool way of working, and we'll build a tongue using that method. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to turn off a lot of things I don't need. Actually, I want to keep the inner shell on. And I'm going to make a new layer. And that layer is going to be called tongue profile. There we go. And let me swing around to the back side here. I'll leave it in perspective view here. All right. And I'm just going to grab this pen tool here and make sure it's set to polyline. I'm just going to draw kind of a shape that I want this tongue to be. That's kind of the curvature of the tongue that I want. Okay, drop that tool. I'll go to the top view here and just make sure that's kind of where I want it. Somewhere around there, I guess. All right, next thing I want to do is add a curve. So I'm going to add a new layer, call that curve. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and add a, let's call it a B-spline. And this is going to be the path by which we're going to extrude that profile that we just created. All right, so I think that's good. I can kind of see through the shoe. It gets a little challenging sometimes to see through objects to what you want to work on. Let's go to the perspective view and see if that's not even centered. Let's top view, just use the W key to move that. I'm just going to move that right about to the center there. Okay, so that is the sweep. All right, so now I'm going to jump back over to the tongue profile, and I'm going to drop this shelf down, and it's going to expose all these other little tools and panels. And on the right hand side, these green little icons here, we have different panels, and the one we want is this one, second to the left, which is the procedural operations or mesh op panels. And this is where you'll see all the mesh operations at. So with that, I'm going to add a mesh op. As you can see, it's highlighted over here, so it puts it in this panel. I'm going to add a mesh op, click on that, and I'm just going to type sweep. And we're going to use curve sweep. And that's the easiest way to find all those operations within that within this panel of operations here. As you can see, there's so many. So by just typing it in there, it'll filter through and find which one you want. All right, so let us go ahead and add a few parameters here. Now with the curve sweep highlighted, I'm going to bring this up a little bit so we can see all these operations. We need to tell it what path we want this thing to be swept along. And I'll just drop that down, and the path is the curve. And as you can see, first thing it does is sweeps it along that curve, but it's all kind of cattywampus. It's sideways. It's not the way we want it. So that's an alignment issue. So I go down to alignment, and I'm going to uncheck that. All right. So there we go. It generated a polygon, or a group of polygons, along that path. Now we can set how many steps we want it to be. If we set it to auto, it puts in fewer steps, and we probably don't need that many. If I uncheck auto, we can set the number of steps we want in this. We can make it really dense or super low, you know, depending upon what we want. But I'm just going to set it to auto, and that's fine. Now we can see here that we have a little intrusion or protrusion of our mesh to the shoe. And I'm going to fix that by simply going up here to the curve, and in my polygon modes I'm going to just select that curve and click on it to reactivate those control vertices again. And I'm just going to drop this guy down. You can kind of see it. Like I said, it is a little challenging sometimes to see through objects that you want to. And maybe this one goes back here. Now you can see how I can manipulate this thing as I go. Now if we look, we see another intrusion here, but we can fix that in a minute. We'll go down the line here. So now I can always change the tongue profile by going, and I can't just select it as a polygon and edit it, because it doesn't want me to edit things that have procedurals attached to them unless I go down to the base mesh. Now you can see, now I can select it. Now I can select like vertices, for example, and move those in, and you can see there's a ghosted view of the procedural operation as well. And I can hit say my resizing tool and bring those in, and you can barely see it. I know it's a little challenging. Let's see if that works a little bit better by clicking that button there, which is ghosted view. And yeah, so if I bring these in a little bit, you can see that it should change that operation a little. Oops. It always wants to go back to this ghosted view, but you can actually see it is changing. All right, so now there's another way of manipulating this curve, but I want to go ahead and add some more operators to this. But one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add another mesh. Oops. Another mesh layer here. And this one is going to be called a merge mesh. And merge meshes are great. You can think of them almost like a pre-comp, where you can take what's comped in one mesh operation layer and just take the result of that and move it onto another layer and let you add more operations on top of that without getting one single layer really huge with operations. So anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and add a merge mesh operator. Merge mesh operator, double click, there it is, and it wants to know what operation I want to add to it. In this case, it's going to be sources, and right there, and I'm going to select the sources, and from this, it's going to be the tongue profile source. Now, by default, it created a UV map, and we're going to just uncheck this there, this UV map on that merge mesh. So there we are. Now, next thing we need to do is we need to thicken this thing. So there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can add an operator here, thicken, or I can add the bevel, the polygon bevel. So I'll type poly and go down here, and we can see that poly bevel's right there. And it has bevel tools just like the old polygon bevel. And I'm going to drag that up, but look what it is. It's only beveling one side, so I'm going to go to the parameters, which are very similar to the direct modeling counterparts. And yeah, so again, we're going to have to adjust our curve that we swept this on. So I'll just speed through this real quick. Okay, so next thing I want to add to the merge mesh, and by the way, I can turn off this tongue profile, because So everything that was in that tongue profile layer is now in the merge mesh layer, or at least the result of what we did on that layer. So, so we're working with the merge mesh, and I'm going to add one more operator, and that's going to be a polygon type. Set polygon type. And what that does is allows me to change that to a Catmull Clark. And there we are. One nice feature here of the of the sweep operator is the ability to scale the model along the length of that sweep. Now I can actually go here and open this up in an editor, in a graph editor, or I can just go ahead and call up this guy and make sure that my graph editor is set here. And if I go to scale gradient, which will be at the kind of near the bottom of the list here. Now the graph represents the scale of the model over the distance of the extrusion. So the scale is on the left-hand side, and its scale is relative to its current size. And the lower parameters are the distance in percentages. So 100% is the full length of that sweep. So by middle mouse clicking on that little panel there near the bottom, you can add a control vertice or a keyframe. So I'm going to add one at 20% and 100%, and I'm going to take the 0% and scale that down, drop that down. You can notice that the model is getting thinner near the beginning of that sweep. And at 20% of the sweep, I've got another keyframe there, and I can manipulate the scale of the model at that point as well. So I'm going to move this around using the Option and Shift key, just like you would in the viewport. You can zoom in. All right. And then again, I might want to go back and go ahead and edit this curve again. Okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And we'll call this done for now.